Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cheryl Stiefel, Assistant Dean for Libraries Advancement, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with you at our celebration of the Anne Gould Halberg Artist Images Series for 2021. This program happens every other year, and it is made possible by the Halberg Endowed Library Fund. Today, due to COVID-19, and the limitations of having large in-person gatherings, we have once again opened our Zoom pathways so our local to global communities can join us for a genuinely special conversation. And we truly have people joining us from all over the world today, including Australia. From wherever you are joining us, we ask you to take a moment right now to reflect on the lands where you live and to gratefully acknowledge the ancestral homelands and traditional territories of Indigenous peoples who have been here since time immemorial. And for those of you who are joining us from more nearby landscapes, please know that the University of Washington acknowledges the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Duwamish, the Puyallup, the Suquamish, the Tulalip, and the Muckleshoot nations. Thank you. Now, before we begin today's program, here are a few Zoom reminders. Today's celebration is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you later. As your camera and audio are not on, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to type questions, which only our moderators will see. Joining us today are many on and off-campus dignitaries, artists, alumni, friends of the University of Washington Libraries, and special guests, all here to help us celebrate. Our first special guest will be Simon Neame, Dean of University Libraries, who will share a brief history of the Halberg Artist Images series and its special relationship to both the university and to the University of Washington Libraries. Next up, UW President Mari Cauce will introduce and share her very personal connections with both our featured artist, Juan Alonso-Rodríguez, and interviewer, Vivian Phillips. The Q&A will follow the interview, and the interview was pre-recorded last year here in the library. Now, during the interview, everyone in the room observed safety protocols for COVID. Our UW film crew and staff wore masks, and Juan and Vivian were seated apart at a safe distance so they could unmask. After the interview, please join us for our live Q&A with Juan, which will be moderated online by our very own Ann Jenner, Pacific Northwest curator here in the library's special collections. The Q&A gives you, our audience, opportunities to ask questions. Just type your questions into the Q&A throughout the program, and then Ann Jenner, our moderator, will address as many questions as she possibly can. We know that you can do almost anything you want in an afternoon, and we are so grateful that you decided to take this time this afternoon to join us. We hope you enjoy the program. Now, allow me to introduce Dean Simon Neame.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Simon Neame, Dean of University Libraries, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to a celebration of the arts at the Biennial Artist Images Lecture, made possible by the Anne Gould Halberg Endowed Library Fund. I'd like to thank our presenting partner, the UW Alumni Association. I'd like to welcome friends and supporters of the UW Libraries, and especially our UW Library staff, who have been working tirelessly during the last 20 months to continue to provide access to essential materials and library resources for all students, faculty, and staff to continue their studies, teaching, and scholarship. Thank you. The UW Libraries are a network of 16 libraries across 3 campuses and an island: Seattle, Tacoma, Bothell, and Friday Harbor. Our libraries are connected by a shared mission to advance discovery and enrich the quality of life by connecting people to knowledge. As a free and accessible event open to all, events such as this truly embody this mission. We are proud to say that Artist Images has become a UW Libraries tradition. The Artist Images series began in 1989, the idea of Jerry Anderson, then the UW Libraries Nordic Studies librarian. The concept was to hold a public presentation by a notable Pacific Northwest artist and create a bookmark honoring that artist. The series strives to shine a light on artists who inspire others through their art and community impact, sharing different perspectives and increasing opportunities for cultural education and preservation. Thanks to the generosity of the late Anne Gould Halberg, the tradition continues. Anne was a longtime friend of the libraries, and if the name Gould sounds familiar to you, she is the daughter of architect Carl Gould, who designed the Suzzallo Library in partnership with Charles Bebb, and whose name is on the hall, which is the home to the College of Built Environments. The Gould and Halberg family legacy is strong at the University of Washington. Thank you all for attending tonight's event. Before we begin the program, I have the honor of handing it over to our president, Mari Cauce, who would like to say a few words about her personal connection with Juan Alonso-Rodríguez, our celebrated artist this year, and tonight's interviewer, Vivian Phillips.
Thank you, Dean Neame, and welcome, and thank you all for joining the University of Washington Library's Anne Gould Halberg Artist Images presentation this evening. We're here to celebrate and explore the art and community work of Juan Alonso-Rodríguez through his interview with Vivian Phillips. I've known Juan for many years, and so I'm especially happy to be introducing him tonight. Juan and I share the experience of having been brought to Miami from Cuba as children, and this common history has shaped both our lives and our friendship. We also both ended up here in Washington, and we make this beautiful place our home. I deeply admire how Juan has dedicated his life not only to creating art, although that would have been more than enough, but to creating a world in which equity and inclusion are part of the art world. His work as an artist and an activist have made the world more beautiful. His career spans almost 40 years in the Pacific Northwest, but his work has been exhibited throughout the US, Canada, and Latin America. It's included in many permanent collections, including the Tacoma Art Museum, the Portland Art Museum, and our very own Henry. You can see his work at Lumen Field, at SeaTac Airport, as well as schools and other public institutions. They're gifts for the public to share. Listing all of Juan's awards and recognitions would delay us from hearing from him directly, so I'll mention just a few that represent his impact. He's received the 2019 Artist Trust Fellowship, the Washington State Governor's Arts and Heritage Award, the Nettie Fellowship, the Seattle Mayor's Art Award, and the DeJunius Hughes Award for Activism. He's also a Poncho Artist of the Year, and he's held a residency at the Centrum Foundation. An activist for the arts and for social justice, he's a strong voice for inclusion in the arts. He's lobbied to include at least one person of color on selection panels. This was in the 1980s. And he created and funded the Latina Artists Edge Professional Development Scholarship. He remains an active voice for more representation and inclusion of Latino and Latina artists, and he lives his values, showing the work of underrepresented artists in his Pioneer Square studio. I can't wait to hear what he has to say. And I'm also lucky to have worked with Vivian Phillips through her time as a UW Foundation board member. She's a lifelong resident of Seattle. She lives in the Central Area neighborhood, and she's an art consultant and advocate whose work is grounded in advocating for the primacy of arts and cultures in our daily lives. She served in numerous leadership roles in government and nonprofits, including being the Director of Communications for Mayor Paul Schell and the Director of Marketing and Communications for the Seattle Theater Group. She's also been a strategic advisor and consultant on many projects across Washington and Oregon, and she served on the Seattle Arts Commission for 6 years. She serves as president of the Board for Culture, on the board of KUOW, and is a founding editor of Art Noir, an online newsletter dedicated to spotlighting Black arts and culture. Anne Gold Hauberg understood the importance of arts to our health as people and as a society. She said, "My hope for you and for myself is that our lives are filled with purpose and filled with content expressed with skill and energy, and most of all, that our contributions endure in the memory of those whose lives we touch." Juan lives these values, which also underpin the University of Washington and our mission for public impact. I'm delighted to be honoring him tonight and excited to hear also from him directly. And I'm excited to hear the questions that Vivian Phillips will be asking him. So I'm pleased to turn tonight's events over to Vivian Phillips and to Juan Alonso-Rodríguez. Thank you.
Well, I want to congratulate you, Juan, and it's such an honor to get to sit and talk with you a little bit and learn more about you and your art. Let's start with your origin story. You are from Cuba, and tell us how you got to America.
So I arrived in the US a month short of my 10th birthday. My mom had passed away by the time she passed away when I was about 5. So when I was about 8, my father came to me and said, your uncle and his wife are going to the US. You have the opportunity to go, and anyone who lived in the same household could leave. And he made it very clear to me that he thought that I should go, but it was really up to me. And
At 8 years old, that was a decision you had to make?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I really appreciated that, even at that age, knowing that my father was not telling me, but telling me why and giving me the options. And so I, having had a very good relationship with my father, I said, if you think I should go, I will. You have to understand that in my early 20s, I made a living as a singer. And so I was looking for places where maybe I could change my career, what the type of work that I was doing. And I wanted to go to LA or New York. So I visited New York. I thought, this is going to be tough. Then I visited LA and I thought, this is not selling me. And I took a car and I drove up to San Francisco for a day and a half. And then I decided that I was moving to San Francisco. So I moved to San Francisco in 1979. I lived there until 1981. 1981, I decided I wanted to go on vacation to Key West, and I ended up staying there for 9 months. And I finally drove all the way back and moved to Seattle sight unseen. I had never been here. I didn't really know much about Seattle, except I wanted to live in a place where not everything had been done, where I could get a fresh start, and I wanted to just figure out what to do with myself and how to work for myself. And I wrote to the Chamber of Commerce. This is before internet.
In Seattle, you wrote to the Chamber of Commerce?
Yeah. I wrote to the Chamber of Commerce of Seattle and other coastal cities, both on the East and West Coast. And Seattle was the only one that wrote back. And this was the time.
We were desperate
well,
for
yeah,
new people.
I
in
know. So
Seattle
this
at
is
that
the
time.
time where Seattle wanted people to
Yes.
move in.
Yes.
And so I thought, well, this looks like a nice place they want me.
I want to go back to your origin story just a little bit and talk about your dad, because I understand that his craft is something that has influenced your work. But it feels like there's that craft in your lineage as well. Can you share a little bit about what the craft is and how it shows up throughout your lineage?
Yes. So my grandfather, who was born in Spain, opened a wrought iron shop in Havana, when he was a younger man. And so when his sons were old enough, they started working at the shop as well. My father was the artistic one of the bunch, and he was the one that designed all the wrought iron railings and grills and gates and everything that they fabricated there. But there's an interesting thing that happened in 1995 that has to do with that. In 1995, my oldest sister came to the U.S., and I had not seen her in 45 years. And so I needed to get stories about my family. I needed to find out things that she knew, because she knew both my mom and my father better than I got to know them. And so she told me this story that I did not know this. My mom was a potter, and she made these beautiful, huge pots that were painted with flowers. And then my father, when he met her, started making these wrought iron bases for her pots.
Wow.
And they would sell them together. And I didn't know that. And so I did this whole body of work based on flowers and wrought iron. And it was just like this tribute to this beautiful gift that they passed on to me.
And that's part of your history that you found out
Yeah.
kind of later in life,
Yeah.
after you'd already started to become an artist.
Oh yeah,
and do your art.
I was already painting and
Wow.
showing work and all that. In fact, I had been doing a lot of figurative work, and I was represented by Francine Setter's gallery. And I remember making that phone call, and Francine, I know that you were expecting this body of work, but I'm going to be painting these, paintings of flowers and wrought iron. And it was, this is what I loved about her, is that she said, as long as the quality of the work is as good, then, I represent you, not a specific body of work. And I love that about her.
So before we get to talk a little bit more about your work, I want to go back to this making a living as a singer. So I had heard that you started your career as a musician, and then you shifted to art. But what prompted the shift?
What prompted this shift was that I didn't feel like that I had the freedom to make the music that I wanted to make. It was one of those fortunate things that I became known for a certain type of music, but I wanted to, just like music was changing at the time, I wanted to change along with it. And I didn't find, the outlets or the acceptance of my trying things other than what I was already doing.
I ask because now I'm going to go back and look at all of your work and see what kind of musicality I can see in there, because I'm sure it's there.
You're going to see a lot of musicality in the work.
I'm sure it's in there.
And I'll give you a little insight that whatever body of work I'm working on, there's a different music playing in the background.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I get it. So what other kinds of shifts, moving from a musician, singer, guitar player to an artist, what other kinds of shifts have occurred in your career?
Oh, boy. To me, change and exploration and changing and discovering new things is an ongoing thing. It's constant. I don't ever want to feel stagnant, and I don't ever want to feel that I'm doing the same thing over and over. So I've been criticized for doing things, doing many bodies of work at the same time, because people have a hard time realizing that one person can do different, what they consider different styles. To me, they're not different styles. To me, they're different parts of who I am. And I think we're all very complex individuals, and the idea that an artist whose entire premise is to be creative and to explore and expand and just use their minds to go beyond what we normally see, to me that doesn't make any sense. So I like to work in different series. I like to do different bodies of work at the same time. Sometimes I'll create a body of work, then I walk away from it and work on this over here. Then when I go back to what I was working over here, I approach it with completely fresh perspective and fresh eyes, and I don't feel like I'm doing the same thing. I feel like, okay, I did this, now I can come back to you and pay full attention to you and just give you my all, rather than doing, put it on automatic pilot just because I know how to do it.
And you talk about how you are influenced and you embrace the natural elements that are around you. Talk about how the Pacific Northwest specifically has influenced the way in which your work has developed.
That's great, because I think sometimes we are influenced by things and then we don't know why. I remember when I really started getting to show my work a little bit more and more, I started out really making abstract work. I was just painting things that were just completely abstract. And then I started realizing that I was very, very far away from my origins. And I was in a very, very different place. And I started making work. I remember, having a couple of shows very early on, and my friends and people that I knew in that world started saying, like, your work looks African, or why is your work so colorful, or it looks like Caribbean. And I'm like, because I don't see that around me here. And I feel that it's almost my responsibility not to let people know, hey, I'm here, and let's include other people and other people's culture. But I wanted to be seen, and it was okay for people to see me as different, but this is what I have to offer.
So you're not painting Mount Rainier and evergreen trees. You are using that as, say, a foundation for the level of comfort you have to then do what's really inside of you. I love that.
Yeah, and I felt like, this type of work happens, and I want to introduce you to it. This is like my gift to the Pacific Northwest, because I'm here, and now that I'm here in this amazingly beautiful place, I need to give it what I can give.
Your contribution is amazing. Let's talk a little bit about your work. So let's start by talking about the Baranda project.
That's a very special project for me, because, and it's something that I've worked on a little bit before. The first time that it happened was in 2011, but let me first explain what the Baranda project is. So Baranda is the Spanish word for railing, just like the railings around the front porch or whatever. But the reason why I called it that is because I remember one of my first moments when I thought that I was interested in being a creative person was when I realized that the railings that went around about 2/3 of the house where we lived in at the beach in Cuba, those railings were designed and fabricated by my father. And, as a child, your parents are your heroes. I mean, and he still is. But I thought, those are just beautiful. And I was really intrigued by the designs, because they were not they were not typical. They were very abstract, and so I realized that I've sort of had been obsessed with these railings that my father had designed and fabricated for a long time. In 2011, I actually got to create some work for Chief Sealth High School in West Seattle, and that was the first time that I kind of touched on that. And it stayed in my mind. And the interesting thing that happened right after I made those sculptures for Chief Sealth High School, called Sentinels, is that I went back to Cuba for the first time in 45 years. Yeah, 45 years after I left. And I got to see those railings in person.
I saw some of the photography from your trip to Cuba. Did you end up looking at the work that you had done and then looking at those railings again and going, oh my God, I really have replicated my father's work in some way?
Yeah,
Oh my God.
I noticed that, and I noticed even from, when I was doing some past work that from memory of, not just my father's railings, but other buildings in Havana, and I was doing a lot of artwork that was based on the facades of older buildings in Havana. I remember walking through the old town and looking at this building, I'm thinking, did I see this as a child? Because I had done a painting that it was almost, had the identical shapes of this building. So it's interesting, like what stays in your mind. And I think that happens a lot more. This is just an opinion. I have, not an, but I think that might happen when there's a traumatic experience. Yeah. I think that if, maybe if I would have stayed there, or if I would have just been able to come and go at any time, it wouldn't have been such an indelible stamp in my head. But the fact that, I was, for a long time, I was not able to go back, I think that made that stronger. And those visions, those ideas that I had in the back of my head, and those memories became really a lot more important to me.
Probably from a desire to be reconnected to your origins. Yeah. What do we see in the Strata series?
So the Strata series started right after, as I was kind of winding down with creating images of, the outside of buildings, and what the ornamental aspect of those, and the wrought iron and all that. Because when I was a child, what I really wanted to do is be an architect. So architecture has always played this huge, huge part of my work as well. And I started thinking about what happens before those beautiful facades are put on. Mm-hmm. So I started thinking about the foundation of buildings. I started thinking about what we do to the earth, what we do to, excavating foundations, how we layer things, how we level ground in order to build. And I started thinking about how the buildings that I find that are the longest lasting in appeal are buildings that blend into the surroundings, that fit the surroundings. There are times that I walk around any city and I'll go, this building belongs in this city. Mm-hmm. That building looks off. It looks like it just does not belong. And then you look at some of, really, really wonderful architecture, and there's always a connection to the land. And, I started thinking about the layers of earth, that, everything that has happened over the, millions of years, and how each, generation of people or animals or all these things that create what we now sit on, what we now stand on. And to me, that whole layering, and it's such a metaphor for everything else too. I mean, it's such a metaphor for who we are as humans. We're very layered,
Yeah. There is this movement too.
Yeah.
That's very fluid in the Strata series, but it's also braced.
Well, so in a lot of the ones that are more curved, mm-hmm. I thought about the idea of a bird's eye view, looking down on some of the terraced gardens, these like rice paddies in Vietnam, and people that adapt their farming techniques to the land where they happen to be. And the idea of how we are so, we have so much ingenuity into adapting to where we are.
Now, your work is also available for the public's view because you've got a few public pieces out. But there's one that I really particularly want you to talk about, and that's Hoodie.
Hoodie is the last piece that I finished. It was commissioned for the Washington State Arts Commission for Renton Technical College. And when they first approached me, the thing was that they had redone a building for their automotive department where they teach, mechanics and all that stuff that I know nothing about. So what I did is I was really excited about this project because I did a lot of background study on Renton Technical College and what they had done before and all the different changes that they had gone through from its very beginning and working on airplanes and working some for Boeing at some point and during the war. So I thought history was very important. So let's take on the history of the automotive department and let's take on the history of the college itself. So it had to be something that referred to something utilitarian. I thought about the people that went to school there. A lot of the folks there are immigrants as well, and I felt a connection to that. So it was important for me to uplift, and so I started thinking of things that a lot of immigrants go through, and we're sort of like pushing forward against all these things that are, pushing back, and so I wanted something that was aerodynamic, not just because of that, but also because it was an automotive department, I wanted it to be a hood ornament.
It looks like a hood ornament.
And so the idea is
lovely.
And hood ornaments have also gone through many changes. So at one point it was a functional thing.
Where you
actually
latch on.
Like you would open it up to fill the oil or the gasoline or whatever. So they had functions. So that was the main reason why they existed. And then they sort of morphed and they became less functional and more brand. So they become brands, and that's what a certain brand of car it is by the hood ornament. And so I thought, well, this is a great thing to have in front of the automotive department. But there were a lot of things that I used, a lot of other symbolism that I used. It's the Pacific Northwest. I wanted to say something about the Pacific Northwest. And I also felt like, I wanted it to be very like reaching up for your goals. You're getting this education that's going to make your life better. So there's symbols of mountains, the Olympic mountains. There's symbols of the Olympic Games. Because it's sort of slanting forward. I also wanted the idea of, the Olympic diving boards when, there are these beautifully designed diving boards, but the grace of a diver. And also I wanted it to look like something huge that looks like it's about to fall, but it's so delicate and balanced at the same time.
It's very dignified as well. It has that stance to it. Okay, so now I'm going to test my Spanish with you. I want you to talk about Los Muñecones.
Los Muñecones. One of my favorite times of the year when I was a kid and living in Havana was Carnival. I loved sitting on the bleachers looking down on the floats and all these people going by and there's amazing costumes. But there were these papier-mâché heads that were worn by people like dancing around. And a lot of times they would come like really close to, and even like as a kid being on those bleachers, and they would come so close to me. And they were a little frightening, as a child. But then as I started remembering those times, like Carnival, I thought it was so joyous. And as an adult, and especially as an artist, I really appreciated, those funky, very colorful, wild, crazy. Sometimes there were animal heads, sometimes there were people, sometimes they were making fun of something. And I really wanted to capture that. And so I started doing, way back in the 80s, I started doing artwork that was based on my memories from a child's point of view of Carnival in Cuba.
Juan, I know you as someone who is very deeply rooted in community, connected to community. Talk about what draws you into all of the various communities with which you are affiliated.
I think we're all very, as I had mentioned before, I think we're all very layered. And I've experienced a lot of loss and a lot of heaviness.
Yeah.
And I think what has gotten me through that have been those pure acts of kindness that I've also been very fortunate to encounter. And I think that we all have this responsibility to contribute to our community, our society. And so there are people that, are doctors and they're, healing people that maybe have no other, that have no funds or whatever. Everybody can contribute, but not everybody has to be able to do it at that level. So I think that for me, it's really important to be able to put the fortune that I've had, because I feel very fortunate. I feel that however I got this gift of being a creative person and gotten to the point where I can live and pay my bills by doing something that I absolutely love. Yeah. I mean, how fortunate is that?
Right.
So why not make it easier for other people to do that? Why not make it easier for other people to be heard if I have the opportunity to speak for them?
I think that what you're pointing to is, kind of the undergird for community for you is relationships.
Yeah.
And creating relationships. How have your relationships been impacted by the pandemic?
For me, because I work by myself, my daily routine did not change that much. What did change was how I realized that I was maybe doing a little too much socially, even though a lot of it was something that I enjoyed. But I think that I realized that I was more of an introvert than I thought I was. It also put me in touch with some people that maybe I didn't know quite as well. And I started appreciating those people more. And then there were people that I knew well, but I didn't realize that maybe they were not the healthiest for me. So it was a matter of, and I think we've all sort of rearranged our lives a little bit.
What have you witnessed about how the pandemic has impacted the creativity of artists as individuals?
Obviously, I mean, it affects everyone differently, but for me personally, I think it made me flourish because I had the time to be more introspective. For some folks, it was a little bit more difficult because I think that maybe if you're a little bit more collaborative in your work and your medium, I think it's been really, really difficult for people who are performers, for people who are musicians, dancers, who really rely on that instant gratification. And I'm saying this as someone who used to be a performer, and there's nothing like what you get, that energy that you get
Sure.
from an audience.
Sure.
I've seen it react, I've seen it affect people in very different ways.
Yeah.
Although it has been creatively good for me, I don't want this. I
You
don't
want to
want
be
this.
clear. You don't want this?
No. It's, and here's what I did when this first happened. I sort of tricked myself, and I said, "You are now on an artist residency. And we don't know how long this residency is going to last, and you're going to forget about a whole lot of other things, and you're just going to make work." Because I've been on those residencies and I love them. I love the fact of, I love going to a place that I don't know and just making work and seeing what happens. And that's what I did. I treated it like that. And this was the lovely thing about it. It's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if it's going to be any good, but I'm just going to do it. And it might just all be thrown out, but maybe some really great things could come of it.
Well, there you go, embracing that great imagination that you had as a child
Yeah.
as well, and creating kind of your own
Yeah.
world. I like that a lot. One of the things that I also am recognizing and have always known about you is, in addition to being very creative and imaginative, you're also very contemplative and visionary.
Yeah.
What is your vision for the way in which you would like to see the arts and cultural world change or move forward?
Well, one of the main things that I would like to see is more inclusivity. I mean, a lot of the things that I've been involved with have had to do with equity and being inclusive, and welcoming people to the table. And I've seen some positive change towards that, but it's not enough. I mean, we're not there. I like to see that move forward, and I like to be able to somehow, and I think if we all do that little tiny part, but to be able to educate people so that they're not afraid of that. I'm not going to take something that belongs to you. I just want to sit at the same table and share the same meal. And it's that kind of attitude that I would like for people to learn to appreciate. And it's not like, I think a lot of people fear something that they don't know.
Sure.
And this is why, even going back to something that we talked about earlier, like moving here and creating work that I felt like, okay, I need to show my Cubanness, my Caribbeanness, my Latinx, all those X's that I wanted to make sure that people knew that those things were not only important to me, but they're important to our society. They're important to the world. We all live in this little tiny blue ball that's floating in the sky. And and the more we know about each other's cultures, and I think the richer we are.
It's been wonderful to get to take a look back at your journey. When you look on your journey, when you look back on, Juan Alonso-Rodríguez trek from Cuba to Seattle, what do you think about for your future?
I don't imagine not creating. I don't imagine not painting. I don't imagine not being involved in the arts. I think I'll be involved in the arts whether I'm making something or not until my hands don't function anymore, or my eyes don't function anymore. But I think that there comes a time where some torches need to be passed on to people that have not only more energy, but have a different point of view.
How do you pass the torch as an artist?
So one of the things that I feel really, really enthusiastic about is mentorship. I started doing that. This was another side effect of the pandemic. In my studio, I used to show work of other people, and there's this very small room in front of, right at the entrance of my studio. And I was showing other people's work and just to introduce people. So when the pandemic started, I knew I had to make some changes. I wasn't able to be opening my studio all the time. I also had to move my office to my studio. So I thought, well, what can I do to continue that idea of lifting other artists? And so I started doing these like 1-hour mentorships online. So I did a bunch of those. I'm probably going to do a bunch more. Then I also had the opportunity to do some of that for the Washington State Arts Commission. And it was amazing how fulfilling it was. Like, because a lot of things that I took for granted, I was doing like, because I just knew that I had to do that. A lot of maybe younger or less experienced artists, no matter what age, they weren't thinking about it.
Right.
The reaction of it was like, oh my God, I didn't think of that. Or even just encouraging someone to continue to make work, even if they were just not being successful at, showing their work or, getting a grant or whatever. Sometimes I would hear from artists saying like, you know what, I just needed to hear that.
Right.
So that encouragement, that's what you pass on. And this was, interestingly, one of the things that someone who was very special to me passed on to me, and that was Jacob Lawrence. I had never studied at the University of Washington. I was never his student, and yet he took it upon himself to encourage me. And as did Gwen Knight, his wife, who is also a brilliant painter. Those situations, those acts of kindness, I mean, that meant the world to me. And the fact that this person that I so admired, that was so admired by everyone, that he took the time and he said, I see you. And sometimes that's all you need, is for someone to see you.
That's so good. Juan, congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is wonderful. Appreciate you.
Welcome, Juan. That was a wonderful chat you had with Vivian Phillips. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
It's a real honor for me to join you for the live Q&A portion of Artist Images, and I'm excited to continue the program with questions. We are gathering questions from the audience and welcome attendees to add more as we speak. But let's start out with you telling us where you are today.
I am in my studio. This is where my office is now. You know how when the pandemic started, spouses started working at home. And so I had to move my office to my studio. But I'm very happy being here.
Wonderful. I see this gorgeous palette behind you of work, and some that we had a chance to talk about during the we had a chance to hear you talk with Vivian about, including Strata and some of the sculptural works. But there's one piece there behind you that you didn't get a chance to talk about. That is that one,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. So I've done a lot of work from this series that, it's all on the website, so you can see it. But they started out with just the basic premise of a horizon. The idea was that, I was talking about indelible memories of childhood. And one of the things that I remember the most is being like just sitting at the beach, just looking out onto the horizon. So in this whole body of work takes on a couple of subjects, some lighter than others. I remember spending a lot of very joyous times at the beach, looking at the horizon and the water. I just love the beach, and especially the Caribbean colors on the beaches. But there was also the idea that as I was getting ready to leave Cuba, there were a lot of other people that were getting ready to leave to be on the other side of that horizon. So a lot of the, not all of the works from that series are light and airy. A lot of them can get pretty dark because it wasn't all positive for everyone that took that voyage. But this particular piece that's behind me, it's called Varadero. And Varadero is this amazingly beautiful beach in Cuba. And I had, as a child, I had never been there. So in 2019, I got to go with my whole family, pretty much. So that was the first time I saw Varadero was with my family. And that was a really special occasion. And I wanted to create a piece that was kind of a remembrance of that particular trip and going to that beach.
It's absolutely beautiful, and it is airy and it is light. And I appreciate you filling in that it isn't just light and airy that you're doing in this Horizon series, that you're also, exploring the dark that comes from that too, because you have had these experiences of loss and cultural loss and separation from family. So it's beautiful that you chose this one. There's a question from one of our attendees who, and it's relevant to talk about right now. How do you know when a piece is done? Obviously, you're displaying pieces behind you right now. How do you know when something is done?
That is such a difficult question, and I think every single artist could say it's a difficult question to answer. I think I have an idea of what the work should look like, and I try to get as close to it as possible without overdoing it, because you can't get to a point where like, okay, now you've done too much and you have to start over again. But it's just a gut feeling for me. It's just, it feels right. There's no right or wrong. There's no one telling you, okay, you're done. It's you and your relationship with your materials and your ability to make them work. And so there's this time that comes and you kind of go like, yep, I'm done. And sometimes it comes quicker than others. And it's I know it's a maybe not the best answer, but that is the absolute truth.
No, I hear you. And also you've touched on place very much in a lot of the work that you do, including this horizon, this beach horizon. And AC Peterson, who's joining us today, wonders if there's a place in Western Washington that you go to that feeds your soul.
Boy, I think I love being here. I live in a very tiny apartment with an amazingly beautiful view. It faces west. And there's like every day I wake up and I have my dining table is right by the window, and I have like floor to ceiling glass, and just looking out there, it just makes me feel good. I think that what I love about the Pacific Northwest is, and being able to go from the city to, driving not very far and being in these beautiful hikes. I try to hike a lot. So being in, just these natural, beautiful places, that encourages me a lot. I mean, that feeds me a lot. In fact, I just literally yesterday, I finished 2 paintings called Rainforest 1 and Rainforest 2. So I just photographed them today, and I'll be adding them to the website, but they're from the Strata series. And it's just like, I remember going to the whole rainforest, and there's those color greens are just amazing. And so a lot of times it's like just little places that I go to. There's a urban park very close to where I live. I honestly, I don't even know what it's called. I think it's Interlaken Park. But when you walk through there, you no longer feel like you're in the city. And it's so great to just like come home and like dealing with people on the street and all that. And then you just go walking and you feel like I'm in the forest. And I love that. And I love those options that this area can offer.
And you take those meditations with you into the studio, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
You've talked about how you get lost in that your work is a form of meditation. And I can see that it comes from both your connection with place in Cuba and also with place here.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Your Instagram game is very strong.
I try.
Yeah. So in your post, you share your work and you also share your technical process. And you also do posts that encourage young artists. So tell us more about your use of social media and how that works in your day, your week, and sort of what does that mean to your work?
Well, I think it's super important for artists to, no matter what your age is, to keep up with new technology, new ways of doing things. Like, I've never, just like I said in the interview, I want to continue. I want to continue exploring. I want to continue moving forward. And, the older ways of promoting yourself just don't work anymore. So I actually kind of enjoy it. I enjoy trying something new and let's see if it works. And fortunately, for me, it really, working with social media has worked. There are times that it frustrates me, like, some of them frustrate me more than others, but I realize that it's a really good place to reach people that there's no way that you could possibly reach if you were not on social media. So I think it's good to demystify the process also. I think it's good to demystify the idea of being an artist. It's like, I don't like to take myself too seriously. So I take my work very seriously, but people go, is it okay to take a picture of your work? It's like, please do, because the worst that could happen is that you're going to try to duplicate it and you're not going to. So, go for it. And, I have no problems with showing like the ugly parts, because most people see the work when it's already done and it looks nice on the wall and all that. But, there's a lot of stuff that goes behind the scenes that nobody sees. Actually, I don't like having people watch me paint. So that's good. I can put little snapshots of process, but that's about it.
That's the closest we're going to get to actually see you.
Yeah. There is a video that was on PBS that I actually had to paint while they were filming, and it was terrifying.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you found that it really influenced the actual product.
I was nervous. Yeah.
And the process, especially recently, you've been posting about the strata and the actual construction and the architecture of that. And I think about your learning about your father and your family's business of actually the physical work that they did in their work. Do you find that you're drawn to this construction component because of the work they did in physically building spaces?
Oh yeah, I mean, I not only was I inspired by it, but when I first moved to Miami and I lived with my uncle, he eventually opened a wrought iron shop and I worked there for a long time. So I knew how to work the metal. I was given the aluminum department, so I did all the railings that were done in aluminum. I knew how steel bended. So a lot of times when I'm doing line work, I feel that I go back to that time when I worked in that shop, and sometimes I'm drawing a line, I go, oh, wait a minute, steel doesn't bend that way, so I can't do that. And I will adjust it to make it work as if I was working with steel. So that's still in my mind, even though I'm not working physically with it at this point. It does translate to other things that I'm doing.
Yeah, that is wonderful. And your larger pieces, your larger sculptural pieces, those are not works that you physically engage in creating, but there is a process of working with artisans and other craftsmen to actually build those. Can you talk about that kind of work?
Yeah, I love making public work, and of course I'm not equipped in my studio. I don't have the space or the machine to laser cut a piece of steel. So I do have to depend on other people to actually physically make that work. I have worked with people that specifically make work for other artists, and I have also worked with artists like Mikaya Bienvenue, who lives on San Juan Island, and he's an artist in his own right. But we've actually worked together on a couple of projects where he has been able to fabricate the work that I have designed. So I mean, it's a beautiful collaboration, and I think that there are a lot of people that have either issues with that, or there's some artists that feel a little bit of guilt about that. But the thing is, I'm very transparent about it. I did not physically make that. And I had a really interesting conversation with Stephen Mioto, who created all the glass mosaic columns at the airport, at SeaTac Airport. And I remember going to his studio in New York and picking out, like one by one by hand, picking out all the different colors for the column that I designed for the airport, and having a really great conversation with him. And I said to him, do you feel that you're an artist? Because I mean, you're amazing. His work is impeccable. And he said to me, like, I'm an artisan because I am not installing ideas that come from me. Like, I am installing the ideas that other people have. So I'm translating an artist's idea and creating something with it. And I think that helped me be okay with that situation.
And what's that like when you actually see that physical piece that you designed and inspired, but somebody else actually brought to life?
Oh, the first few times that I went to the airport after the column was installed, I kept, hassling the TSA agents. They were like, I did that. That's mine, like, and I do visit it. I do visit it every time I fly somewhere, and sometimes I'll take a picture of me with it, and it's kind of special because you kind of feel like, I mean, thousands and thousands of people, like, on a daily basis go by it, and you feel a sense of pride that you made something that everybody can enjoy. It's not just something that it's in a gallery or in somebody's home or in a museum. I mean, it is there for the public, and not everybody's going to love it, but everybody's going to see it.
That is beautiful. That must be a really awesome experience.
Yeah.
Speaking of community and being out there in community, what are your thoughts on the role of community in your work as an artist? And I'm thinking of the community of artists here in the Pacific Northwest.
I know a lot of them, and I'm really happy to. I think that having that connection is really important. I think you need to be part of a whole. I mean, we all work pretty much alone. So there's got to be some sort of camaraderie once you're not alone, and like because you work alone, and because it is a profession that there's no specific right or wrong. You really need to have people that you can trust, that you can depend on to tell you the truth. Like right now, I'm at the TK building in Pioneer Square, and I'm in a hallway with 7 other artists. And every once in a while, I might feel like, hey, you know what? I need an opinion. I need a different point of view, and I have definitely counted on that and been helped by my colleagues to say like, hey, maybe how about trying this, or how about trying that. But yeah, it's funny when I've done some workshops about especially like professional development. One of the things that I say, I know everybody hates the word network, but you really have to do it. It's really important, not just for business, but it's good for your soul. I mean, it's really good to have people that you can call on and say, I got another rejection, how did that happen? And everybody's gonna, yeah, me too. And then you feel like, okay, I know. It's like, we can't take those things personally, and it's just part of the whole career. And so I want to get involved, and I want to get involved in things that I don't know about. I remember like when I joined the Seattle Arts Commission, I thought, I want to learn. I want to be on that side of things. I want to see, because during being on the Arts Commission, I could not apply for anything, that the city was funding. So I thought, okay, this is worth it. I'd rather just not be eligible and learn exactly what the process is like, so that I can understand it when I am eligible and I apply to things. I know how to better do it. And it just gives you a different perspective of the way things work. And, learning anything is worth it.
It's a great perspective, and it's part of that mentoring work that you do as well. To expand this conversation a little bit, I've got some questions from audience members. Terry wants to know, who is your favorite artist, and how has that person inspired you?
I have several. I don't have any one favorite artist. That's not true. I think I do. I think I have one favorite artist, and his name is Wifredo Lamb. He is, now gone. He's passed away, but he was born in Cuba, and he was of African and Chinese descent. And he made it big in Paris. And his work is just magnificent to me. When I did go to Cuba, there is a museum that has a room full of his very, very large works. And I was with my whole family, and I said, please go away. Just go outside and just let me sit in this room. And I will probably cry a lot, because his work is just so beautiful. And I remember the first time I saw an original piece, and that was at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art many years ago. And I thought, well, I have to see more. So that if I had to just like narrow it down to one, I would say Wifredo Lamb. If you hold on here.
Sure. I love this, that you're in studio and you can bring it out. Oh, there he is, Wifredo Lamb. Yeah.
Yeah. So I also there are some other artists that I feel really strongly about. I talked about Jacob Lawrence and Gwen Knight. And there's also like Georgia O'Keeffe. So here's the thing about Jacob Lawrence and Jacob Lawrence and Georgia O'Keeffe, that I love their work, but more than even that, I just love the way that they lived their lives and the way that they approached making art. Like that, that uniqueness and that passion. And like, George O'Keeffe, like, I'm going to make this stuff and I'm going to go to the middle of the desert and make this stuff. And I don't care what anybody thinks. And like, and then Jacob Lawrence, he went against all odds to make his work. And he moved, from New York to here to take this position and to influence so many of us here. I mean, those things, like the way that people comport themselves is equally important to me than the work that they produce. And the one other artist that I'll mention is Carl Appel, and he's a Dutch artist. And he was one of the first artists that I thought, I love that. I love that energy. And I love that, that, and if you've ever, there is a documentary or a film about him painting, and I just love the physicality of it. But those are, there are so many local artists that I totally admire. And I have a nice collection of other people's work at home. I don't have my own work at home.
But your work is, yeah, thank you. And you travel and work in different places, and you discover your work, or of your work in other places. But I've seen that on social media too, where places that you visited have displayed your work, and these are things from many years ago. What's it like to discover those on the walls of people's homes and in places when you've traveled quite a distance?
I think I feel like a child, because it's kind of like, oh my God, oh, that's mine. I made that, and it's just this really sense of, there's a sense of pride, but there's also a sense of giddiness that you feel like, oh, I did something good. I did something that's pleasing somebody else, because, for me, like, making the work is what's really fulfilling. And once the work is done, I feel like the work has a responsibility to make somebody else happy. And so when I see it at somebody else's home, or I go into a hotel and like, oh, there's something I made, it's kind of a nice feeling, because it's making other people happy besides me, because I'm already done with the part that makes me happy.
Right. So what would you say, and this is another question that came from one of our attendees, and what would you say to a young artist from Cuba or other Latinx background coming to the Pacific Northwest today?
You're going to miss your culture, but you can make your own. There are people that will listen. There are people that will look for you, but you also, you do have a responsibility. Like like one of the things I said in the interview, I felt like, I needed to bring what I had. It's kind of like, if you're head of state and you go to another country and you bring a gift, you don't bring a gift of something that they already have. You bring something that is specifically yours and that is undoubtedly yours. And that's how I feel about going to any place, not just the Pacific Northwest, but any place where your culture is not abundant, that you have almost a responsibility to teach. You have a responsibility to say, hey, by the way, I make something that might be different than what you're used to, and don't be afraid of it. It's okay. And you don't even have to like it, but it's here. And I want you to be exposed to it, because, it's my gift. And so I think that having no fear, having a thick skin, being, just being fearless about the fact that you are who you are, and nobody can take that away from you. And I think just being honest and being true to yourself really goes a long way.
Beautiful. Another question from an audience member, Carrie, who wonders, are there goals that you still have to achieve? Are there things on the horizon that you're shooting for?
Yes, many.
Many. Okay.
Well, first of all, I have more ideas in my head than I could possibly complete. So there's all kinds of things that, ideas keep coming and coming and coming, no matter how much work I make. There's always like 10 ideas behind what I just finished. I would like to, there's just simple things like, I would like to be represented a little bit more throughout the country at this point. It's been a difficult couple of years because of COVID, and people are a little bit more careful as to, having more people in their galleries and representing more people. So I think everybody's a little bit cautious, which is very understandable. Those goals for me, it's not about being rich and famous. For me, it's about continuing to make art every day and continuing to, yes, and I would like to be able to make money to pay my bills and take a trip every once in a while, and all those things that everybody else wants. But it's not some, like, I used to think a little bit more about fame and notoriety and all that stuff, and I don't think about that as much anymore, because it's not as important as just making good work and continuing to do what I do until I can no longer do it.
And it's definitely more than art that you're making. You are also playing an important role in the community. I'd like to talk a little bit about activism and your perspective on activism. What is activism to you?
So to me, activism is about, well, like, I think of the word activate, and it's to make something work, to make something happen. And I think we don't have to create this huge thing. I think we can take small steps, because I think that if a lot of people took small steps towards something positive, it could happen a lot easier than it does. So to me, it's like, okay, I remember, like, I know Mari mentioned like these scholarships that I started for the EDGE program, which was a professional development program that I also helped write, and I taught a couple of sessions. And one of the things that I heard was, I would say, like, why aren't there enough Latinx artists applying to this thing? And I remember hearing from a couple of people, and not just for that program, but for grants and other kind of things. And I kept hearing over and over and over, Latinx people are just not prepared enough. And I thought, okay, that's wrong. And instead of complaining about it, I thought, what do I do so that I can fix it? So what I did is I did a fundraiser so that I could create that scholarship and have people that were Latinx go through the program without having to pay, so that nobody could tell me that they were not ready. So it's just finding what the problems are. And I mean, look, I will admit that I complain about things, but there's also the, okay, you're done complaining, what are you going to do to fix that problem? And to me, that's what activism is. And it's just making sure that whatever you see that's not right can be, at least you make an attempt to make it right. So that's why I do things that are a lot of work, or sometimes they're uncomfortable, but it's just taking small steps to trying to correct the wrongs that are prevalent in society, and they're everywhere.
Yeah, and you're interacting with the community to actually see those and respond to those.
Yeah.
And that is a very important part of your work. I think you and I have talked about, you don't see yourself as your art as activist art, but you're expressing your activism in the ways that you interact with the community.
Yeah. Although, anything, just being an artist is a political statement. And being an artist of a certain ethnicity who is not making work that's stereotypical, that is a form of activism.
Talk a little bit more about that. How have you experienced that?
Well, a couple of times I have been excluded from group shows that were themed, like, Latinx art, or art, a group show of ethnic art. And they're just like, well, your work is not ethnic enough, or your work is not Latino enough. And I thought, this doesn't make any sense, because you don't want to limit what somebody is capable of creating. To me, that's stereotyping, which is something that I fight against all the time. And so to me, like, continuing to do what I feel, like, not what I think I should be making to please people that don't know enough. I think making sure that I'm actually feeling what I'm making and wanting to make it is more important. And that also shows the public that, oh, just because he's Cuban or he's Latinx or whatever, that doesn't mean that he cannot do this type of work. I mean, I think we had talked earlier, and when I said it's kind of like telling a woman, your work is not feminine enough. It doesn't make sense. Your work is your work. It's whatever you're feeling in your heart that you need to be making.
I love that. I think these are things that you not only have experienced and can articulate, but I know these are things that you pass on to new generations of artists as well. Tell us a little bit more about your mentorship, your mentorship program. I know it's informal, but you've been experimenting with different ways of connecting with younger artists.
Yeah, so since I haven't been able to, this is not my office, so I can't be showing other people's work. Plus, the fact is that not many people have been coming to the studio, so there was no point in showing other people's work. I have no,
because you normally would show. You normally,
yeah. Normally I would. So I thought, well, what can I do to replace that? Actually, I had one last Friday, and I had one 2 Fridays before that. So I had like 4 sessions each day. And it's just basically, when I do it, it's kind of like, hey, I'm doing this. You can sign up, first come, first serve. It's free. And a lot of times it's people that really do have some questions, and how do you do that? Sometimes it's just people. I think people want to be encouraged. In fact, I actually replied to an email this morning because I was not supposed to be in this one mentor program, and for some reason my name was still on there. Oh. And this one artist contacted me, and I said, please just send me your questions and I'll reply. And so I did that, and it's kind of it's very fulfilling to me, because it's like you just sometimes want somebody to tell you, yeah, keep going, keep making art. And I think that there's this idea that if you're not successful, like financially, or if you're not, even if you're not making great art, it doesn't matter. You should really be making art anyway, because making art is going to help you succeed in whatever else you're trying to do. It's just, that whole creativity thing.
It's important to be true.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So here we are nearing the end of the program, Juan. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention as we close tonight?
I think don't be, for those of you who are not artists, and for those of you who are like just want to appreciate art, just feel a little bit more free to like go in those galleries, go into those artist studios, and go to the gallery walk and just explore. And I think there's a certain intimidation that happens with art, and I think that we need to get over that. And I think we need to get over that whole mystic aspect of it. It's just, it's our profession, it's our passion, it's what we do. And for artists, I feel like, you have to continue to make good work and be honest and be truthful and do network,
Wonderful.
And yeah, I just keep at it, because I think you should probably, if art is not your 100% passion, it's a tough road.
Now, we're going to close here in a few minutes. Would you like to send any greetings out?
I would. So I have to say that I've been super excited about this, and every single person at the UW libraries have been fantastic to work with. When I first heard that I had to, do an interview, or it's like, oh God, I don't know, but everybody has been so super helpful. They've gone out of their way, including you. So thank you. But besides all the folks involved with this program, there are a few things that I feel like I wouldn't have been asked to be this year's lecturer if it had not been to people like, Barbara Earl Thomas, Dennis Evans, Nancy Mee, and Francine Setters. And I also want to give like this huge thank you to Vivian Phillips. She's amazing, and I thought that's who I'm going to ask first, and I hope she says yes. So thank you all for having helped make this happen.
Well, thank you, Juan, and thanks for sharing your work and your conversation. It's been wonderful. And we invite everyone in the audience to visit Juan's website and keep up to date on any gallery shows or other events that feature him and his work. And Juan invites you to join his mailing list and receive announcements. You'll find a link to his website on the library's event page and in our post-event email to you. Thank you all for attending the library's Artist Images program. We appreciate Vivian Phillips for taking the time to do the pre-recorded interview with Juan. And we thank Dean Neame and President Cauce for their greetings tonight. And we look forward to seeing you at future libraries events. And we wish you all a lovely evening.